The Wizards of Havenbell Trilogy, Book 1, The Child of Harmony, Chapter 3, Josaphara Kingdom. Inside of the wizard's cave, the ex-elves, now goblins, prepared for their attack on Fairy Island. The wizard's brew was getting low, and they needed all of the power they could get for their next move. The quarters that sheltered these goblins and slaves were at the deepest space in the cave, and were 4 times larger than the fire pit cavern, and twice as dirty. Some of them were lured into the cave by the power of the Dark Ones. Others had been captured and locked up against their will. The truly evil goblins were made into the first and most wicked army. The truly evil goblins were made into the first and most wicked army that was led under Leader Stack's commands. They were located the farthest away and were fed and treated better also. The slaves and weaker goblins were treated very rough, and they lived in very nasty quarters. Rats scampered about with their tiny eyes glowing and tails dragging behind them like wires. A large man stood behind the goblins, herding them like cattle. He was very fit and muscular. He stood 7 feet tall and could intimidate even the strongest and bravest warrior. He was rather good-looking in the face, fair, pale skin, sparkling light blue eyes, and strong Greek-like features. He almost looked good-hearted, but was not in the slightest. Lar was a very bad boy. He hovered over the slaves like a raging beast. "Get up, maggots, it's feeding time," Lar shouted, with his deep and loud voice. "Get to the line!" He raised his voice even louder. The first goblin crawled to his trembling feet. The rest of them stood in long lines awaiting scraps. Each got a small cup of brew, less potent than the other that the high wizards drank, which kept them docile and content. Lar was thinking about the half-breed. He had ways of knowing and seeing things, and his hatred for that mutant girl had escalated to the point of madness. Her mother had been responsible for the death of his mate, Charlana, in the fire of Phaethia. Lar had all intentions of getting his revenge upon her daughter, although he truly never cared much about Charlana, nothing close to what his brother had felt for her. Lar now fancied Aurora. Lar and Tambit had always disliked each other, and now Lar's wanting for Aurora had made him hate Tambit with full black disdain. "Eat up, maggots," he thought darkly. "Tomorrow is a big day, so eat while you can." They could almost make out the castle through the clouds when Trillium's green amulet began to glow. The sudden warmth made her jolt with surprise. "Why is it glowing?" Farisef asked, his wings cutting through the air like oars in the water. "Good question," Trillium responded. "I'm not searching for anything. Well, maybe the castle." She squinted her eyes to make out the structure in the distance. "That must be it. What do you think, Duran?" "I think your mother's spirit is guiding you," Duran answered, with that strange, low voice that still made Trillium uneasy. "Well, her amulet helped me through the maze of Maylene." "What's that?" Farisef asked. "My home, where I'm from. I'll tell you about it another time. Right now I want to see the castle." She grasped the amulet in one hand. There was a large cluster of clouds ahead. The top of the highest watchtower came into view, but it was not made of stone like she had expected. It looked like glass, translucent as the last day's sun beamed through its crystal walls. "Watch this," Farisef said, and flew towards the left. The clouds opened, revealing the front of the glass castle and the large pillars that grew up from its corners. The surface was glossy and smooth. She could see no door. "Is it made of glass?" she inquired. "No." "It looks magical," Trillium whispered. "It is." "It is," he answered, and began to fly sideways in the opposite direction. The castle disappeared like it was never there at all. Then he flew back the other way, and the castle reappeared. "I can see right through it. Is there nothing inside?" "It's magical, Trillium. It's not what it seems." The massive beauty of the castle entranced Trillium. It was even better than her dream. The last rays of sun beamed through the walls, making a wave of rainbows through the glass. She was speechless. She could now see a couple of Josapharians sitting on the clouds. She bit her lip. "Here we go," Farisef said, and landed upon the clouds and let Trillium down. Duran perched on her shoulder. "Feels funny," she laughed. She took off her sandals to feel her toes in the clouds. The ragged and bloody rag of Farisef's shirt was still wrapped around her foot. She took it off her ankle. They all looked at her wound with curiosity, but were startled to see nothing there at all. The big gash in her foot had recovered in 4 hours without even leaving a scar. The medicine did its trick, Phariseph grinned. She slid the sandals back on and followed Phariseph to the castle. There was no door, just a crystal-clear wall. Phariseph raised his hands and put it against it, palm first. It seemed to read his hand, and the wall slowly dissipated, changing its solid shape into a doorless entry. "Welcome," Phariseph greeted. As they entered, Trillium's mouth sat open in shock. She turned around a couple times to let her eyes scan the new surroundings. They entered the main hallway. It was huge and full of echoes. Beautiful paintings of Josapharians filled the walls and ceilings. Trillium touched the walls. "What is it, Phariseph?" she asked. "A painting of our people. You've never seen art before?" "No, I only remember a few things from Phthia, mostly consisting of sewing and basket making. It was nothing so lifelike. I want you to meet my father." Trillium continued to walk with Phariseph, a little excited and nervous at the same time. There was a small group of feather women that stood visiting on the far side of the hallway. They watched with large eyes at the stranger in the castle. It wasn't really the fact that she was an elf that bothered them. It was how smug she looked next to Phariseph, the same prince that never gave a Josapharian woman a second glance. Morgan Augusta stood with the other women, watching in startled numbness. "Who does she think she is? How did an elf get up here?" Morgan muttered to her friends. Then she realized that he must have carried her, which angered her more. For months now, Morgan had tried to capture Phariseph's attention and had done everything she could to no avail. "She's wearing a Josapharian dress. How dare she pretend to be one of us?" Trillium saw that the women had stopped talking and now were staring at her. She gave Phariseph a questioning glance as they walked in front of the pack. Morgan slipped her foot out and sent Trillium face first onto the hard, glossy floor. Duran flew off startled. Her face felt the harsh impact of the floor, and then her brow creased with anger. The women laughed around her, making her more embarrassed and close to an explosion of rage. Trillium rose to her feet. She looked the winged woman in the eye with a face of stone. Morgan whispered to the pack under her breath and stifled a laugh with her hand. Trillium got close to her and stared at the girl. Trillium spoke. "I could really hurt you if I please, but I don't think that would make such a good impression on the king." All of the laughter ceased, leaving the hallway with an eerie, empty sound. "Elves do not belong here," Morgan raged. "And they do not deserve to wear our clothing." The prince walked between the two, his face locked on Morgan's. "She is the child of Harmony and is of more royalty than I. I could have you sent straight to your death for your dishonor," he stated. All 5 of the women fell to their knees and made a constant stare at the glossy ground. Trillium relaxed a little, getting her anger under control. "I beg your pardon, your majesty. I acted out of turn. Please forgive me," Morgan cried. "Just stay out of our way and all will be well," Phariseph warned. "Thank you, your majesties. I am truly sorry," Morgan repeated. Trillium glanced down upon the girl. Phariseph gave no reply to Morgan. He started to lead Trillium down the main hall again. Duran perched on her shoulder. Morgan raised her eyes when they turned their backs. She felt anger at the elven girl. Now that she knew she was the child everyone talked about, it would make things much harder for her. Morgan was aware that the half-breed possessed certain powers and could possibly tear Morgan into 2, and that fueled her revenge. She fully intended to see them again. From outside, the castle looked thin and weak, but on the inside it was solid as stone. There were statues of the Josapharians scattered through the hallway. Trillium went straight to a sculpture. "It's a statue of my great-grandfather. He died when the wizards attacked Phthia. He used the last of his energy to fight them. He sounds like a brave man." He was. They passed through 2 doors on the left and a large door on the right. Each seemed about 10 feet tall, made out of reddish wood like cherry or mahogany. There were carved designs on each door. The one on the right had food, fruit, and a feast upon it. "Dining room," Veriseph informed. A few steps up, they came to another door on the left and one on the right opposite to it. This door had 3 crowns on it. "Throne room, here we are." He opened the monstrous door, and a huge screech bounced echoes through the hall. It was a large room with a narrow red carpet that stretched from the door to the thrones of the royals. There were beautiful statues of Josapharians in here as well. Paintings adorned the walls and ceiling, and numerous pots had plants and flowers spilling out over their rims. 3 golden thrones sat at the back of the room, standing on elevated steps. The 3 of them approached the king and queen, and when King Jonathan spotted the white owl on Trillium's shoulder, he smiled. "Duran, so good to see you here. How do you like my palace?" Duran flew to him and perched on his arm. Jonathan rubbed his head. "Magnificent," Duran complimented. Jonathan heard the deep voice coming from the owl and wrinkled his brow. He knew something was happening, something strange. Veriseph linked arms with Trillium and led her up the red carpet. "Father, I'd like you to meet Trillium, the child of harmony." The king and queen lightened up. Trillium observed the king's fancy clothing. He wore loose pants like the prince, and a decorative shirt that was tan brown and full of design. A golden belt hugged his waist and then disappeared under a large robe he wore. Upon his head sat a glimmering crown. The jewels inside of it shimmered in the light. His toga shirt fastened on the left shoulder, as well as his wife and Veriseph's. All wore the golden plate with the J carved in it, and pinned behind it hung a wavy, loose piece of clothing. It looked similar to a scarf. He had an oval face and long gray hair that was braided down his back. His eyes were golden brown, soft and delicate. Something dangled from his neck that reflected the light. It was an amulet, just like her own, but clear in color. Trillium gulped. The queen sat on the left of the king. Veriseph's empty throne was on the right. The queen of Josaphara looked to be in her late 30s. She had brown hair that hung in big fluffy curls that bounced on her shoulders. Her face was soft and pale. Her eyes were a warm green-blue that made Trillium relax a little. She wore a flowing cream dress, the same color as Trillium's, but much more intricate and stylish. She also wore a robe, but not as bold as the king's. A delicate golden crown sat upon her head. She had on no amulet or jewelry. Trillium wondered why she didn't wear one. She knelt for them. "I am Jonathan, and this is my wife Amber. You look rather well. How are you feeling? Any dizziness?" "No, I feel fine." "Excellent. The spell worked well. We were afraid it would work differently on you. We have a great many things to discuss with you, but first we'd like to get you cleaned up. We shall eat dinner together and discuss our business then." "We are so glad you found the shell and made it here," the queen said. "Veriseph, can you show her to the washroom, and then we will meet you in the royal dining room." Trillium stepped back and knelt before them. "Thank you, your majesties." Veriseph guided Trillium out of the throne room, down the main hall to the washroom, both of them excited for the events to come. The king and queen sat at the long table in the center of the dining room. It was smaller than the throne room, but was just as elaborate. The walls were a solid maroon with a painted border of golden leaves that ringed the top. Trillium opened the door. This door didn't creak. They looked at her and were all stunned. She looked radiant, just like royalty. The dress she wore was now cream and goldenrod, almost as fancy as the queen's. The strap went over her right shoulder. There was a golden plate with the J symbol upon it. She believed it to represent the Josapharian race. She also now had a scarf that hung below it. It was a sparkling brown. The maidens came into the washroom to help her apply some makeup. This made Trillium nervous, but she let him do it anyway. They pinned up her hair in big curls. A couple of loose ringlets fell softly by her face. She knelt politely in front of them. "They have already been talking about your arrival. Soon I must announce to my kingdom that the child of harmony is here. King William made me promise to keep my identity a secret. Nothing stays unnoticed for long, especially in Josaphara. Many have seen you in the halls. I think it would be all right now. The Josapharians need you. They want to serve you. It is better to tell them the truth than to let them make up their own. Please sit." Jonathan sat at the head of the table. Phariseph pulled the chair out next to his, and Trillium sat down. "It seems like such a huge table for such a little crowd." "We need to be in privacy tonight," Amber explained. They dined together, and it wasn't till all of the food and dishes were taken away until the king spoke again. When the dark wizards first split Havenbell apart, it crippled the first council terribly. The elders of the council, our grandparents, relocated our temple and had to change it as well. No longer human, the council members were split into races and had to change the temple to be accessible to all. It was placed on the end of an island in the sea. You cannot see the temple from the outside, like it isn't there at all. Queen Amber spoke softly. They put a spell of illusion on it, stronger than the one here in Josaphara. Trillium remembered the way that the glass-like castle had disappeared at certain angles. "How did the Drella members get into the temple?" Trillium asked. "The door only opens at full and half moons. This is your amulet to open the door to the temple. If you succeed in returning the shell, you will need it." He handed Phariseph an amulet similar to his own, clear in color to represent his own element. Phariseph smiled widely, and Trillium helped him clasp it around his neck. Jonathan continued. "My grandfather was Josaphara himself. William's grandfather was King Adrella, and the first queen of the elves was named Phaethia. The power of the first temple began to lessen, and the leaders began to die off, leaving our parents to take over the council. The rest were killed or captured. Our third council was beginning to stand on its feet when the wizards stole the eye of the temple. They came back and destroyed it completely. Once again we rebuilt the temple, close to the location of the other, but hid and protected it from harm. Our new but smaller temple is half on land and half on water. You shall see for yourself soon, after you return the shell to the fairies." Trillium and Phariseph were very excited by this. "After the first attack, when the land was split, how did the wizards travel to Fairy Island for power? Didn't the spell affect them as well?" she asked. "We believe that the wizards meant to destroy all of us, but somewhere the spell went wrong and transformed the earth and humans. The Dark Ones used enchanted crows to help them spy upon the other lands without actually leaving. They also trained the crows to kill and bring fairies to them," Jonathan stated. "They came on boats to get inside our temple and steal the eye. The eye of the temple holds a lot of power. It was the center point for the force field in Fairy Island. When the wizards could not catch the fairies, it must have made them furious. We had a meeting one day, and a few hours after we left, I felt very strange. I sensed something was not right. That night, every member in the council had the same dream. We all had a dream about a fire beast of destruction. When we awoke the next morning, the wizards had broken the fields and attacked Fairy Island, killing numerous amounts. They must have found out about your mother's discovery of a reproduction spell. My guess is that who or whatever stole the temple's eye also found out about you and came to Phaethia to kill you both. I fought with the brave ones against them, and I saw the power that the eye had given to them. I only saw 2 wizards and the dragon." "What's that?" Jonathan described the dragons of old and told her that there were 3 before the Dark Ones first attacked. All of them died after the splitting, but this dragon was not like the others. Theirs had the shape of a dragon, but is made of flames. They can ride it without being burned and travel to anywhere they choose." "Sounds frightening. What happened to Phaethia after the attack?" "They all moved to the south, further away from the mountains where the Dark Ones hang out. They got on their feet again, even with hundreds of elves missing, and rebuilt their homes and cities. Half of Phaethia remains black and desolate. Even after 17 summers, no grass or life ever grew back." Trillium was saddened. She remembered how green and lush Phaethia used to be when she was young. "Your mother and grandmother were killed and taken to the mountains. They were all very brave to fight. Your mother killed one of them. She was a strong woman, just like you." "I miss her very much." Trillium closed her eyes, trying to fight back her sorrow. "We know you do." Amber stretched her hand across the table and clutched Trillium's hands. The elven girl smiled back at the queen, accepting her comfort. Jonathan spoke again. "You and my son shall meet the council soon, and I will tell you more about it, but first you must return the shell of hope and save the fairies, or all will be destroyed. Do you have any more questions for tonight?" She knew she had several, but on the spur of the moment she could only think of one. "I found a half circle in the maze of Maylene. It has the letter T upon it. I never found the other half. Do you have an idea what it is for?" "Yes, I do know its use, but I'm afraid I can't tell you until you find the other half." "Why not?" Trillium demanded. "It's the rule. Let destiny take its course." She was irritated with this answer. He was beginning to sound like Duran, but she knew it would have to settle for now. Nothing much was said afterward, and Trillium guided the Child of Harmony to the guest room. They talked a great deal, and Trillium told Farisef about her upbringing in Maylene. He felt sorry for her many summers without much company. There was an awkward silence after she finished her story. The prince put his arms around her shoulders and told her she would never be alone again. He kissed her on the forehead and wished her good night. It had been a very long day for the both of them, and tomorrow would be even longer. When Farisef left for his room, Trillium sank into the large, soft bed and slipped beneath the smooth sheets. She felt she could spend each night in a bed like this. She thought of Farisef as she drifted into her dreams. The next day, after a royal breakfast and some encouraging words from the king and queen, the girl and the prince were ready to return the shell to its home among the fairies. Farisef had never been to Fairy Island, but had studied the maps that his father had and memorized them. Although he was a dreamer, he had a memory like an elephant's. He was an extraordinary navigator, and he would not need a map to take with him. Farisef led Trillium outside into the courtyard. Many feathers gazed at them but paid no mind. There were living quarters behind the castle and on the other sections of Josaphara. The houses looked similar to the ones the elves lived in, square and simple, but had a silo-like structure on the side, which gave them a little lookout tower, and contained 3 sleeping quarters. In the center of the courtyard stood a grand fountain of stone. 3 feathers stood back to back with arched spines. Their wings touched each other's at the tips. Water jetted up from the center between them and flowed down into a giant round bowl. "This is gorgeous. It is almost unreal." She felt her stomach waver like it had many times when something was not right. The queasy feeling made her aware that she knew they must leave right away. She tugged at Farisef's arm. "We can spare no more time." He knew instantly to follow her decision. Her voice was calm, but most serious. They gathered their supplies. Farisef let Trillium handle the shell. It made him dreamy and thoughtless. It hardly affected her. Farisef drank some of the endurance potion and carried Trillium in his arms as he flew from the castle, remembering every detail of the map. They started for the island. Never in her life could she imagine the beauty of the landscape she saw now. Things had changed a lot since Maylene, and there were still many adventures to come.